The UK has a big problem with knife crime. It's been steadily getting worse. Tens of thousands are affected and hundreds have been killed in the last year. So, is arming more police with guns one possible solution? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the British police are among a handful of forces that do not carry guns as standard practice. There are reasons for and against arming more officers, but would it help to bring down incidents of knife crime?
Each neat pile of clothing represents a life lost to knife crime. These families say more desperately needs to be done, like Julie, whose grandson Liam was killed in 2020.
It's just so easy to get knives all the time. Knives are as easy to buy as a can of Coke in a shop. They've got an emergency situation. This is like a war. We're losing kids to war. You know, it's just never ending.
Actor Idris Elba hopes his profile will help bring attention to the issue and make the government pay attention.
I think there's a young Idris or a young person somewhere now who's 14, 15 years old, who's frightened to death about their community because of knives, whose future might not make it.
There were 602 homicides from knife attacks in 2023. That's compared with 186 deaths in 2015, a more than threefold increase in less than 10 years. And that's led some to question whether more British police officers should carry firearms. Last year, 6,651 officers were authorised to have guns in England and Wales. There are nearly 150,000 officers in total. In the entirety of 2023, 10 police firearms were discharged. For those who've lost loved ones, something needs to change. Is a more armed police force perhaps part of the solution, or will it just create other problems?
Well, let's meet our guests. Dal Babu is a former Chief Superintendent, that's with London's Metropolitan Police. Cheryl Phoenix is the founder of a non-governmental organisation called the Black Child Agenda, which aims to tackle the criminalisation of young students. Cheryl also campaigns against knife crime. And Norman Brennan is a former police officer who retired in 2009 after serving 31 years. He's now a campaigner for police protection. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Norman, I want to look at the stats behind knife crime in the UK. Up 81% in a decade, according to the Office for National Statistics. These are shocking.
They absolutely are. I mean, every knife is a potential murder weapon, whether you carry it for criminal activity or whether you carry it for self-defence. And it's very worrying because it leaves horrific injuries. People are left in the streets to die, and it's very frightening. And even as a police officer, I was stabbed myself, arresting an armed burglar. And I started campaigning on knife crime as well as being a campaigner for police protection 35 years ago. I could see what was coming. I could see the epidemic that was coming, the crisis. And with many black families, many white families, I went to number 10 Downing Street. I think it was the 13th of December 2004. And we said, something has got to be done about knife crime. I represented and supported Damilola Taylor amongst many other people. I've met up to 1,000 families of homicide in the last 30 odd years. And the devastation I see in everybody's face is identical, because every time they're a victim of knife crime where they've lost a child or a loved one, time stops and life changes forever. We all get on with our lives. These families are left basically like if it was the Life Brigade, you're knocked off your horse. Everybody else gets on with the battle. Your battle, just to survive, is there. But yeah, knife crime, it was predicted, it's come. Neither government have ever listened. And unfortunately, most groups that actually want to do something to tackle knife crime and the youth that are often involved in it, and in London it's primarily young black children, they're rarely ever funded and they're left to flounder. And no government has listened. And even now I listen to the general election promises. I've seen nothing that I can see reducing knife crime and tackling knife crime and protecting society.
Cheryl, what's your experience working with young people in London? Knife crime, how prevalent is it? What are they saying to you?
It's actually a combination of several things. You have a high proportion of exclusions, which to me has a direct relationship with regards to young people being groomed into carrying knives, being bullied into carrying knives, and then carrying the knives for protection. So when we speak to young people, number one, a lot of them are very scared. And number two, a lot of them, they probably go through emotion to where they're now angry because no one's listening to them, no one's protecting them. Like what's been mentioned with regards to cuts and things like that in services, people try to pretend that that doesn't have an impact. But, you know, we had a youth club. When my children were coming up, we had 185 children. That means that there weren't children on the streets being able to be groomed into gang violence or doing anything they shouldn't be, because they were in a place where they were protected, they were in a place where they were learning and achieving and doing different things. So when we look at what he said with regards to, you know, both governments, they're both as bad as each other. We need the investment, first of all, to stop kicking these children out of schools. We need the investment in also looking at we have to look at the statistics with regards to a lot of young people involved in knife crime. The majority of those young people as well come from the care system. The majority of those young people as well come from directly the schools to prison pipeline, which is exclusions. So unless we're looking at it before it gets to the point where they're already groomed onto the streets, where they're already carrying things, where there's support out there for parents. Parents are working. If parents stay at home, they're called lazy. If parents go to work, they're not available for their children. So where's the in-between? You know, people are paying taxes. So within that tax, where is the funding for the children that are going to be the future leaders of this country? And it doesn't seem to be anything there. There seems to be this blame game. Let's blame the black community. Let's blame the Asian community. Let's blame that community.
Do you think the black community gets blamed for knife crime unfairly? What's your reading of it?
100%. Well, again, let me go back to exclusions. A black child is 168 times more likely to be permanently excluded from school than their white or Asian counterparts. Why is that? Why is it that as an organisation, we have a 99.9% track record of overturning unlawful exclusions and getting children back into school? Why is it that a black child with severe disabilities, SEMH, autism, ADHD, whatever it may be, will be the first ones to be kicked out of school? Now, just going to that stat and then looking later on, then of course there's a problem. There's a problem from the time that they're as young as 5. In schools. There's a problem when they get to 13 and 14 being accused of things they haven't done in schools. They're unlawfully excluded. If parents don't know our organisations or other organisations out there, where do these children end up? Of course they're going to end up on the streets. Of course they're going to get embroiled in a lot of these things.
And this is where the gangs are picking off new victims to carry out their work.
The amount of young people that are autistic, high-functioning autistic, who some of them don't even understand social cues, that are sitting in prisons right now under so many different laws, that are being groomed into carrying a life, being told to go over and actually do something to someone, and they're going to listen to what they've been told. So unless we're looking at the whole picture and not just saying, well, it's the black community's fault, oh, black single parents, that's the number one thing that we always hear. As a black mother myself, who is a widow, yeah, so we had a 2-parent household. I became a widow. That then made me a 1-parent household. With that, it was one of the hardest things, getting support and also raising 3 sons. One had gone off to university to do his law degree, and the other 2 were at home as teenagers. What was happening? They were being locked in isolation on a daily basis. Don't people think that's going to have an impact on my children's mental health? Which is what's happening in schools. These types of cases with mental health, young people being bullied in schools, teachers not listening. Look at the young boy that was made to kiss someone's shoe the other day. All of these things are going on in schools. What is anyone doing about it? Turning a blind eye. So when a child now gets to 14 and 15 and people accuse them of being angry, aggressive, is it any wonder if you've been silenced your whole life, told to sit down, be quiet, your voice doesn't matter? So then before we get to knife crime, let's deal with some of the core issues, and then that will take care of itself. We won't have children being groomed into knife crime. We won't have children lounging in pupil referral units, possibly not getting any results in their GCSEs. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Thank
Dal,
you.
tell me, how do we feel about better protection for police officers? And I mean in terms of carrying revolvers, proper weapons. We're seeing police officers responding to incidents with a taser. One in particular got a lot of traction recently in Hainault in London, where a white guy had a 4-foot samurai sword and had murdered a child and was attacking police officers. And they were expected to disarm him using a taser. Do you think it's time police routinely carry weapons in the UK?
No, I don't. I was a firearms gold commander, and I was involved in a number of firearms instances. In fact, I was on one incident where a couple of my officers got shot, So I've had the experience of being a gold firearms commander working on firearms operations. I've also seen the damage that knives can have. I've also been a police officer in London. I've been shot at. I had been shot by a gun, had knives pulled on me on numerous occasions. That clearly is not right, but it makes a big difference when you're able to utilise the equipment that we already have, which is sort of tasers, which is effective ASPs, spray, and we have the strictest gun law control in the world in this country. Following the Dunblane shooting, where somebody was able to go into a nursery in Scotland and shoot children, following that, we've had the most strictest gun laws. We're an island country, so it makes it very, very difficult to bring guns in here. And what you're seeing is people will convert imitation weapons into guns. They'll have to make their own bullets, but we don't have the kind of problem that you have in Europe and God forbid in America, where even if you've had 4 deaths, it's not even reported as a mass shooting because there are just so many happening. So I think we have the right balance at the moment. Tasers were rolled out to every single police officer following an incident when I was a borough commander at Harrow, where a number of my officers got attacked, and we had to call for a taser. And the tasers at that point were with specialist officers only. And as a result of that incident in Harrow, where officers had been stabbed and we were waiting for tasers, the decision was made to roll out tasers to people across all police officers effectively. So I think we have enough equipment at the moment. I think we need to be very, very firm and continue to be firm on gun control. And where we've had shootings, mass shootings here, and I'm thinking about the incident in Plymouth, where people have been allowed to have guns even when they've got severe mental health issues, and there's been failings in the system as it exists at the moment. So the danger is, if we allow police officers to have guns, then we will end up perhaps escalating the kind of situation where other criminals will want to have guns. So we have a huge problem with knives, and we haven't dealt with that. I mean, the statistics on knife crime are horrific in the way it's increased over the years. What we need is education for people who carry knives, and make sure that we're doing that at the earliest possible stage.
Dunblane, of course, was where 16 pupils were shot dead by a local man who had access to firearms in Scotland. That changed everything, Norman, didn't it, in terms of gun ownership and licensing in the UK. But tell me where you stand on the issue of police officers being routinely armed.
Well, I must admit I disagree. I've listened to you many years. You're very eloquent and you've got all the experience. Certainly as a senior police officer, I've got an experience as a frontline officer, and you will recall that I set up Protect the Protectors many years ago because the police were not protected. The police are facing unprecedented attacks by knives, not so much guns, but obviously there's 4,000 gangs in Britain, 200 in London, and each of them are probably 12 to 50 strong, not much more. Majority of them are going to be carrying a knife. And there was a commissioner, I think it was Sir Paul Condon, that said arming of the British Police Service will be event driven. Well, I've never seen so many events where police officers have been shot, not so much, but definitely stabbed, and now they're being attacked with machetes. And if I was a Chief Constable or Police Crime Commissioner, I would be challenging the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, and the criminal justice system. And I would say that I'm not sending any of my officers, unarmed officers, to someone armed with a knife, a machete, and definitely with a gun. Because tasers are absolutely fine, but they don't always work. If you've got baggy clothing, it often will stick in your clothing. If you've sort of got, if you're under mental health issues or if you're on drugs, you can be hit by a taser, and do you know what? Your inner strength will just not react to the taser. And as you rightly highlighted just now, there was somebody over, I think it was in Hainault, they had a sword. Not many people have sword. However, if that taser had not worked, and it didn't work as effectively as it could have done, then that officer may have been beheaded, lost their arm. And too often police officers are losing their jobs through ill health or through very serious assaults. And as I say, there will come a time when we will be armed. I wouldn't give a lot of the police officers today a firearm, but we're the only unarmed police service in Europe. And as I said, if you are a frontline police officer, and often in the sticks, they're single crewed, and you're in a little village or a town, you're the only police officer, probably for 10 miles, you get out your patrol car, somebody comes running out of a bank, a building site, either co-op, with a gun, rarely, but most definitely probably with a knife or a machete, and the public are screaming and they see you. What would you want to challenge that individual or other individuals, knowing that your backup is 10, 20 minutes away, and the local firearms officer could be even, or team could be even further? The time has come now to start recruiting police officers, just like they do in Northern Ireland and the rest of Europe, with the right temperament, train them to carry a firearm. So when they are on the streets, you've got the right people employed, the right people carrying those weapons. And it won't be happening in the next few years, but we must start thinking about that. The streets of Britain, I'm ashamed to say as a retired police officer, and I don't say it lightly, are unsafe. They're dangerous, and there's too many people carrying knives, machetes and weapons, and they're not frightened to use them. And they got no value of life. Losing theirs or taking someone else's, when did that ever become acceptable?
Well, let's just take a look at some stats on this. According to YouGov, 31% of Britons believe police should be armed, 55% believe they should not be armed, and 14% said they do not know. Cheryl, where do you stand on the issue of British police carrying revolvers?
I haven't got a yes or no answer whether police in the UK should be armed or not, because I don't know if there's that many incidences that would warrant it. Now, maybe I'm wrong, I'm not a police officer, but from what I've seen, yeah, I don't know.
Dal, I want to ask you, how do you think serving officers would feel if they were given the option of carrying a revolver?
Well, at the moment, people are recruited to unarmed service, and that's what they sign up to. And I think in your survey itself, was it 55% of the public didn't want police officers to carry firearms. So I think there'll be a lot of police officers who will say, well, actually, I didn't sign up to carry a firearm. We do have a lot of officers that are armed. So particularly in London, you've got the people that look after the diplomatic corps, the royalty protection, you have the ARVs, the armed response vehicles, you have undercover agent units that are armed. So we have a lot of police officers that are armed. And in fact, when we had the murder of Keith Palmer, PC Keith Palmer at Parliament, it was a protection officer that shot the culprit, the murderer dead. It wasn't somebody who was in uniform on patrol with an armed weapon. So we have a lot of officers that are armed. So I think we need to bear in mind what people are being recruited for and what their expectations are. But I think my experience as a Gold Borough commander was that we had sufficient resources, and we deployed those as and when is necessary. And remember, once you start, every officer is employed with a firearm. You could have a situation, as happens in America, where firearms get taken off police officers, and then those police officers are killed by their own firearms as well. So I don't think there's a clear-cut answer for that.
But Dale, just sorry to interrupt. The Met is pretty unique. London Bridge, etc. There were a lot of firearms officers. They normally get to the scene pretty quick. But if you were a PC out in Oxfordshire somewhere, and you were unarmed, or you had a taser, and there's somebody with a gun, somebody with a knife, somebody with a machete, and you're a lone patrol officer, because they're single crewed there, what would you want to protect yourself? And you know as well as I do that tasers don't always work for the reasons I earlier gave, and they're not always effective. You shoot a taser at that particular individual, you're the only officer there, and you know the backup is 10 or 15 minutes away, firearms officer even later. What would you really want to deal with that incident? Over in Spain, Portugal, Northern Ireland, we never have any sort of outrageous shootings where police officers have made mistakes. Occasionally, there will be an error. You know as well as I do, being a Gold Commander, that there will always be an investigation. What would you truly want, knowing how dangerous the streets are, not just of London, of Britain, and you're that lone patrol officer out in the sticks in Oxford, and you'll face someone, say a machete, I'll go halfway. What would you really want, knowing that your taser may not be effective, and you might be going home that night without an arm, or probably not going home.
Norman, the reality is guns are banned in this country. It's wholly...
That's why I never used a gun.
Yeah, it's wholly exceptional to have a gun. And so those instances where people have weapons, if we were having this conversation 10, 15 years ago, I think you could make an argument for the fact that there'd be a lot more guns in this country. We have the strictest controls of guns anywhere in the world, and that means that we don't have weapons routinely used. It's highly unusual to see people with weapons and using them. I think tasers are effective. I think what we need to do is understand we have recruited police officers, and you know as well as I do that we have a huge challenge in keeping police officers. You know, the number of people who are leaving the organisation shortly after joining is 30% in some areas. It's a big crisis, and what we need to do is make sure that we've got police officers who are properly trained in order to do a good job. 20% of all police officers have less than 5 years experience. So we've lost a lot of police officers. We're in the process of recruiting them, and that has its own challenges.
But there's hundreds and hundreds of firearms officers. Met officers are contacting me that are serving. I spoke to 2 sergeants just recently, and I said to them, do you think what happened in relation to the officer that shot Chris Caber, do you think about that at all when you pull your firearm? And both the sergeants said, yeah. And what they said, that could cost that officer their life. And in relation to firearms, hundreds of officers have handed in their tickets, so there's even less firearms officers and even less that are applying for those jobs because they have lost the honest belief.
Yeah, they threatened to hand in their tickets.
I know many have.
But anyway, let's bring it back to knives. Cheryl, just give me your opinion on what can be done to start getting fewer knives on the streets and less young people carrying them.
It's interesting because wasn't there a parliamentary debate just the other day, about 2 days ago, where they were asked if they would ban Rambo knives, or one of the knives, I can't specifically remember, and 272 MPs said no. So what is the problem with knives? Like, if knives are being made very easily and available to some of these young people who are sometimes not even buying them themselves, they're being given them, they're being groomed. We have to look at the core problem. We can't turn around and start saying we're going to put a sticky plaster on the effects of what's going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of things that need to be changed first. And until those things are changed, we're going to be having this debate in another 20 years.
I think Cheryl's right.
Around knife crimes.
I think you're right, because if you look at the internet and how easy it is to get a knife, it's easier than getting a pizza delivered.
Yeah.
If you go onto the internet, you're able to access knives that there should be no reason for you to have. So they're sort of hunting knives, they're still available. This problem has been going on for years, 10, 12, 15 years, and we've allowed it to happen. So for me, there's 2 key things. One is you need to stop the supply of knives, and the internet allows you to purchase knives, and that should be stopped. There should be no reason for you to buy those sort of knives, serrated knives, long knives, knives with handles, knives that are designed to kill. The second thing is we need to start educating young people and children at an earlier stage. And I think when we have that transition from little school to big school, when you were 10 and 11, you go from being dropped off to school to travelling to school on your own, on a bus, where you're vulnerable to being a victim of crime or being in gangs.
I think the selling of knives is a red herring. All we've ever discussed for years, I've been campaigning Knifecrime. I'm probably the longest campaigner that still remains, 35 years, 15 years when I was a serving police officer. I met families in the black community, families in the white community. Every murder is important. Do you know what? A lot of the murders in London are often young black kids. And I did an LBC interview the other day, and the presenter and I didn't quite understand what he said. He said, do you think it's because in London a lot of black kids that are murdered that people don't take it seriously? And I think that is the case. It appears that
100%
these kids...
it's the case. They don't take it seriously until it's another white face. And that's a fact. We know that.
But the point, what I was getting at, is that I think it's about time that we didn't keep on dealing with the froth of knife crime. We dealt with the substance. What we do need is we need 5 years mandatory sentence for an adult, 3 years for a child. Yep, I know it sounds harsh, but we've never ever dealt with that. We do need mass stop and search. Families that are in mortuaries with family liaison officers said, do anything, please do anything. And stop and search is an effective tool. And although some sections of the community don't like it, these families don't.
Final word to Cheryl. Final word.
300,000 people have been arrested in 5 years under stop and search.
It was actually 40,000.
High.
But the fact still remains, statistically, stop and search doesn't work. It's racially biased. You keep deflecting between Oxford and London. London has a larger demographic of the African and African Caribbean community, absolutely. However, when you're talking about knife crime, when a black child dies, we don't see the front page headline until a white child dies. And then we hear about, oh, we need to change this law, we need to change that law. That is a fact. So when we have things like Black Lives Matter and things like that, they really don't matter. Because if they did, then number one, black children wouldn't be disproportionately excluded. Number two, black children wouldn't face racism in school that now does not have to be recorded or reported. We wouldn't have young people being groomed into and forced to carry knives.
I
and the
post
list
and
is
care
actually
on
endless.
every murder in London. The mayor never does. Black Lives Matter are very selective. Every lives matter. And do you know what? It's about time that the black community and the white community and the police, instead of blaming each other for issues that we're all partly responsible for, is sometimes look within and start dealing with issues within our own communities.
No one's blaming anyone. At the end of the day, within our community, when we try and build on things that we know actually work, what happens? It gets taken away, it gets torn down. So don't tell us, we pay taxes like anyone else. Most black-led organisations do not get the funding. However, a white-led organisation will get millions of pounds in funding, and then we're supposed to do the same work, if not more,
and a lead
on a
campaigner. I
Guys,
have to beg for money. I have to beg for money.
The clock has
white.
beaten us, guys. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit the subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.